everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curless.
And welcome to the Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey Trist, what do we have this week?
A little something different this week, Elaine. Our first entry without lyrics. And I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe also our first music from a film, at least made expressly for use in a film.
Oh, okay, cool. I think so as well.
Oddly enough, both of those things don't necessarily correlate with the artist who we might think of, because the artist is Björk.
Oh, Björk.
So if you know anything about Björk, one of the first things you think of maybe is her unusual voice, a very unique voice, and the fact that she is a singer, and yet we're going to feature music from a movie and doesn't have any singing in it.
Interesting. Yeah, I do think of Björk, and I've actually not really listened to a whole lot of her music, but from everything that I've read, most people think maybe she's a bit eccentric. She definitely has a different sense of style, and that's really where I see a lot of photos of her in particular styles that are maybe outside of the center norm, but that makes her really interesting.
Definitely.
Okay, well, what song are we listening to?
Well, this is an overture. It's literally just titled Overture, an instrumental piece that, like an overture in any work, is at the beginning of the movie. At least I assume. Full disclosure, I've not seen this movie, Dancer in the Dark, a movie she actually acted in. It's on my list. I'm going to see it someday. I suppose in some ways it might have helped this podcast, but I'm actually kind of glad I didn't see it because I don't have any context. I can just listen to the music and see what things come to my brain. It's like a song that you hear before you see a music video for it. And then when you see a music video, you have attachment to what maybe someone intended it to mean, and you stop being creative in your brain and you only think of the video. So I guess I'm glad at this point that I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, okay, cool. So we're going to drop the links to this particular track in the show notes. But before we pause, can you give us a reminder of how we should be listening to music?
Absolutely. Especially on this, I think this piece of music is so dynamic. I just love the way it's recorded and how it sounds. Please, if you are able, again, we're just happy to have you regardless. But if you are able, get yourself in the best listening environment, find the quiet room, find the better headphones, find the better stereo, whatever it takes. If you have the ability to do so, give yourself a treat and improve your listening for this one.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to take a pause and we'll be right back. And we're back. Ooh, that was an interesting listen. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this. And why did you choose this particular piece?
I like that this takes you on a journey. I find it difficult myself, even as someone who does something like this or has taught music or is a professional musician. It's more difficult to speak about instrumental music, I think, even in preparing for the podcast. I always go right to what the lyrics are and how they relate. At some point, the lyric comes into play. So I liked this one because I liked that it didn't have a lyric, and I liked that it still really went somewhere and lets your imagination put into play what this could be for. You have the title Overture, so you understand that it's the beginning of a work, and maybe these are themes that happen throughout the piece, etc., which is more traditional and like a musical. We'll have little snippets of all the songs that you're about to hear in the musical, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think it's quite that, but the music does appear again. And on the album itself, the album closes with a piece of music that is this same music, but also Björk singing over it. So there is a lyric.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I have problems talking about something that has no lyrics. It definitely is different. The experience of listening to this was very interesting to me. I hit maybe somewhere around like a minute 45, 2 minutes, and I could feel the tension in my
Mm.
shoulders. I ended up closing my eyes at a certain point in time while listening to it just so I could listen harder. Like I can listen more closely when my eyes closed. And it was interesting because there was a certain type of tension. I listened to the track multiple times to figure out where that tension was coming from. And just about the 2 minute mark, it completely releases you from that tension and it goes to a quieter place. And that was absolutely fascinating to me from a composition perspective. And so, I listened to the entire track, went back to the beginning and tried to listen for where that tension was coming from. Tell me what you heard from that perspective.
Well, what I like about that is the tension that builds even as you hear the theme several times. The ba da 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 da. It does that phrase many times. It builds dynamically, but almost every time it's met bo da 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 da. Right on that, there's a close harmony. There's a close second, I think. The harmony isn't resolved there. There's tension. There's crunchiness, I guess you could call it. So it feels like you're heading to a thing that's going to resolve. And when it gets to the main thing, instead of being a nice open, it's tight. And so it doesn't give you that right away. I like how it does that every time it builds. That tension is there. And then it releases after that. But right where you think it might be open, there's a rub there. I love it.
Yeah, and I wrote that down as positive dissonance.
Yeah,
in
sure.
that, and it wasn't out of place. Like there are certain types of musical dissonances that you're like, oh man, that's not even in the same key. And this one, it was very subtle because it was something that I think our brains understand in terms of that type of dissonance. But one of the things that I was hearing in the music was a single note that was just repeated over and over again. And it just held that tension. It created that tension because the music was moving around it. And as the melody and other parts of the music were moving around it, it created tension in that moment. And it just kept on going for quite some time. I mean, probably 20 seconds or more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great concept that can be used very effectively that way. Usually called a pedal tone. Sometimes I guess that could happen in the middle of a harmony, but usually more frequently that's kind of happens toward the bottom where you just have this thing, no matter what the chords change, that note just stays there. And yeah, it does create tension because there's this thing that isn't moving while this other stuff is. And you're right. Sometimes all the harmony kind of lines up with that pedal tone. And then sometimes the pedal tone is the weird note, if you will.
Yeah, that reminds me of this piece. I can't even remember what it was, but it was a whole bunch of alleluias, and I, as an alto one, I was just singing that D, the entire piece. It was like a 3.5-minute piece, and I was just holding the D.
Well, you're an alto, so that's your lot in life. When you
I shifted to soprano too afterwards, but but yeah, the curse of the alto, right? But similar kind of thing where that one note, the entire piece revolved around that one note. Sometimes it was the root, sometimes it was the fifth, and sometimes it wasn't even in the chord at all, and it created some kind of tension there because it was a fourth or something.
Yeah, just beautiful. I think, again, sometimes in our podcast, there's like the stuff that we dive into and pick apart. And sometimes I'm literally bringing it up because I just think it's beautiful and it's an incredible listen. And I think it's magical that it doesn't take a lyric to move you in any direction. Like just in a calm place, just listening to this and the way that it builds, the way the arrangement builds, the way the dynamics of it build, and all brass instruments too, the way that they tune and work together, and how quiet and how big they can get is all captured in this same little repeated theme. Oh, and speaking of the arrangement, Vince Mendoza, an incredible writer and arranger. He might have even helped compose this, but definitely the arranger of this, Vince Mendoza. Look him up. You've probably heard music of his before. He's written and arranged for all kinds of people. Matter of fact, on the Manhattan Transfer album we did called 50 that has the orchestral arrangements, he did 2 of them for us. So great guy, amazing musician.
Yeah, let's go back to the instrumentation. You were talking about brass, and I had written down it's all brass plus timpani. I just wanted to make sure that it was all brass. But I find it interesting that brass was chosen for this particular piece versus a full orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And I am curious what you think about that because I have some thoughts.
Nothing too particular other than just the choice of color. You're composing this, you're thinking, oh, what do I want the sound to be? I want it to be this rich, full sound. You could have string orchestra play all of this and play with dynamics and play beautifully and still get some effect. I just don't know if it'd be the same. And it's hard to tell if when this is being composed, if you start out saying, I want this to be all brass, or if you create some music and say, oh, what instruments do I want here? Be curious. If I ever meet him again, I'm going to ask him that. I don't know. What do you think? I think just a texture at some point that, oh, I could do a lot dynamically with this and I love the sound of this. So I'm going to write these this way and voice it this way and have these chords work this way because it'll sound great in brass instruments is my guess.
Definitely, I think the textural aspect of it is a big part of it. But one thing I was thinking about is that brass instruments are inherently breath instruments because of the way that they're played.
Oh, yeah. And you can hear when you listen in your good listening environment with your good headphones that I recommended, you can hear the breaths.
Yeah. And I think that's actually important because, one of the challenges of playing stringed instruments versus any kind of breath instrument is that you have to sometimes make a string instrument sound like a breath instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so easy just between the bowing that you have on the string instruments or whatever plucking. It's just very mechanical, right? It's kind of the same thing with piano where you're playing this percussion instrument. How do you make the piano breathe? And in jazz, it's really, really important. But I think in something like this, where you have breath instruments, in some ways there is something that our ears are attuned to that makes it seem more organic because it is a breath instrument. And again, you'll hear the same thing with MIDI instruments, right? And part of the reason maybe why brass sounds so weird in these more digital spaces is that we don't necessarily think about the importance of breath until we hear something live and then realize that breathing is such a big part of playing brass instruments and even arranging for brass instruments. Same thing as, you and I both come from choral backgrounds. And so that you need to figure out where is everyone going to breathe.
That's really interesting.
You have a large group and you're like, okay, we're just going to do catch breaths here, right?
I think a place this shows up is in some saxophone players and some brass players who can circular breathe, where they take in enough air, and because of the way that the instrument is played, you can have a reserve of air that's coming out that you saved up that's basically in your mouth. And then you can breathe in your nose because there's a reservoir created that you couldn't do when you sing because it's just all open. So because there's this pressure, keeping some amount of air in your mouth, you can breathe up through your nose while still playing the instrument, and the sound never breaks.
Right.
That's why the audience has that effect, because even if you haven't pointed it out, even if the instrumentalist doesn't say, here's this thing that I'm about to do, when they just do it, I'd never thought about it that way. The reason why it gets your attention is because we're waiting for that breath. We didn't even notice that they were doing it for the whole rest of the concert, but then all of a sudden when they do the circular breathing, all of a sudden your brain starts to pick up, wait a minute, it's been like a minute now. Oh, okay, now it's 2 minutes and they're still just playing, and the sound hasn't broken.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that subconsciously takes you a second to realize, oh, I'm feeling this kind of odd discomfort because I haven't heard a breath yet. A famous example I can think of recorded is the Carnival of Venice by Wynton Marsalis. He plays the entire thing like on basically one breath. We'll put that link in the show notes also.
Well, yeah. So going back to the whole concept of the sense of humanity or the sense of breath that comes with it, I think that there is a very close linkage that we have between breath and living and life itself. And I think that kind of fits into the sense of intimacy that this particular piece has. It is a quiet piece, but it also has tension in it. And that tension, again, comes from the arrangement, but also I think where the instruments drop in and drop out. You referenced it briefly before, but can you talk a little bit about layering?
I think obviously it's used here to help with the dynamics. So when we need the bigger sections, you just add, it's simple as that to me. Layering here is simply to add sound. Yeah, you can play the instrument louder, but then also if you add more of them, it creates the dynamics wanted as well.
And I think also jumping on that, you were talking about adding sound, but there's also the subtraction of sound as well. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we see this in choral music or in vocal music a lot when people drop really quickly to piano or also drop to unison. That's something that we hear a lot where we're like, ooh, right? There's
Yep.
something about that that really brings us to a place of focus in a
Mm-hmm.
way. And so at that 2 minute mark, which is really where I see a lot of the tension disappearing, and right about that 2 minute mark, it drops to just two instruments. And that to me was like, whew, okay,
Yeah.
well, now we have something that doesn't sound as tense. And now we're going to begin to build on top of it again.
Yeah. Now I definitely need to watch the movie because I'll be curious to see if basically that also follows the line of the story of the tension of the whole movie. It's very common in art of any kind to have that kind of building, repeated themes, tension and release, sometimes suddenly, sometimes a slower denouement. But now I'm fascinated to see if it kind of follows that. Not only does she sing a lyric at the end on the top of this, I wonder if it does kind of follow the story of the movie. I don't know anything about the movie.
Yeah, another movie night, it sounds like we need to
I think
have.
so. I think so.
So let's talk a little bit about the percussion on this because the choice was to use timpani, which I thought
Hmm.
was really interesting. What do you think the role of voiced drums are in this place?
Well, I think it was probably, like you said, a great choice because easily tunable to fit the sound. And I think it just fits the timbre they're going for, the sound you're going for. To add some kind of a rhythmic element, yet not really stick out. I actually hadn't really conscientiously thought about it until you mentioned it. And as soon as you said, I was like, oh, yeah, there's totally timpani there. It wasn't in the fore of my mind. That's a great utilization of it, is that it's not trying to get in the way, but just help reinforce some of the sections rhythmically.
Yeah, and I think orchestrally, we have a couple of different types of drums. I think those of us who are in pop or rock or whatever, we're not really thinking about timpani. We're thinking about maybe toms. But timpani, because it's such a large drum, first of all, it's voiced and you can tune it, but it also has a really round tone as opposed to some of the other drums that have a sharper attack. And
Cut
so
through,
you
right?
end up with less of like a high pitched thing and you end up with a percussion that is a bit lower. And also it resonates so much because, again, it's
Mm-hmm.
such a large drum. So I think to your point in how it fits within the whole sonic experience that we have here, it is subtle because it isn't a very sharp attack. And it's also resonant because we have tones that last for a lot longer because of the shape and the size of the drum itself.
Yeah.
You thought we wouldn't have anything to say here.
Really, when you very first mentioned it, I hadn't even considered them, but absolutely. That's how effective they are, is they're not supposed to necessarily be standing out, but supporting and fits the tone and the vibe of the music.
Yeah, well, any last thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, just hope you get a chance to listen again now that we've talked about it a little bit. The whole album is pretty cool, but definitely listen to the last track on the album, Selma Song's New World is the title of that same music with her lyric and singing on it.
Yeah, definitely really interesting. Thank you for introducing it to us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so with that, let's transition into our next segment, which is
Mailbag, mailbag, mailbag.
okay, so this week's mailbag is from Threads. Once again, you can get a hold of us via Threads or Instagram at The Musicians Loop, LOUPE, or via email at themusiciansloop@gmail.com. So please do reach out. We'd love to hear from you and love to hear any of the questions or comments that you have.
Yeah, it's a good place to let us know your thoughts about this overture. And if you did see the movie, its place in it, and your thoughts about its relevance to the movie or any other thoughts you have about this, please share.
Awesome. So let's get into this mailbag. This is from an artist named Western Jaguar, and it comes from August of 2025 on Threads. And the question is, anyone else have a self-imposed quote unquote take limit when recording? What I mean is when you're recording a part, if you can't get it in a certain amount of tries, do you scrap it and try something else? I usually sit around 4 to 5 takes. And if I can't get it within 4 to 5 takes, it's probably too hard for me to recreate if I ever did have to play it again.
Huh. As my answer always is, it depends.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
Depends on the individual, depends on the music. So a self-imposed take limit, to me, that sounds like a situation where you are recording yourself. I have more limits if I'm working for somewhere else and time is money, and it's that kind of a studio recording where it's like, hey, let's get this as good as possible. So it's like, hopefully I've prepared enough or I can read it down enough that I can get it as quickly as possible. I think that doesn't apply as much as when I'm recording myself. Okay, hey, if it takes me 20 times, either that's fine, that's what it took. But if it keeps doing that, then it's like, maybe I need to do some more preparing. Or like this person said, oh yeah, this is just too difficult for me to recreate anyway. Why am I even doing this? So sometimes also the take limit varies on what part of my voice is it in. You know, if it's at some extreme limit of my voice, it's like, well, there's a limit because if I exceed the limit, I'm not going to be able to finish a song because I'm going to blow my voice out. So sometimes that's the self-imposed take limit. That's also where a producer comes into play saying, okay, here's the singer. I have to figure out what tools I have. I have tools to move notes. I have tools to move pitch in different directions. If they give me the vibe and the feeling that I'm totally going for, but this one note was a little flat, to me, that's the best use of these pitch correction tools. Like, oh, I got all of the feeling. I got 99% of the notes or what I want. If I just have to fix this note, no need for us to sing it 10 times just to get that one note as in tune as I want it to be.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I know one of the pieces of advice that I got from you was when I was trying to hit something on the extreme low end of my range. You were like, just do it tomorrow morning. There's no reason why you need to do it right now.
Exactly.
Like when you record first thing in the morning, you're going to get that extra full step there to be able to, and sure enough, you were right. I got that extra, half step that I needed to be able to nail it and make it sound really good. Yeah, it's interesting to think about how things have changed. You were talking about studio time, and when you and I first started out, we didn't have our own studios. It was really hard and really expensive to get your own recording equipment and recording space. So you ended up renting some kind of studio to be able to record your pieces, and that was expensive. So time is money. And at that point in time, you're like, okay, well, I can only do X number of takes to be able to get it right. And otherwise, we're just going to have to live with whatever we live with, right? Or it's going to be a more expensive album. But in today's world, a lot more is democratized. You and I are both on really nice mics right now. So we have our own home environments and our own digital audio workspaces, right? Where we can do our recording and make it sound really good. A lot of other musicians have access to it right on their laptops. So how do you think our philosophies about recording has changed over time with the more democratized access to these types of technologies?
Well, yeah, in any of these kinds of disciplines, it's going to change with the technology available. Even just the styles of music have changed with the technology available. Even in this kind of a case where you used to have, well, let's have the conversation and make sure that we're always speaking perfectly and don't have slip ups. And when I can't think of a word now, you can just kind of wait a little while and then splice that together. And maybe used to not be the case, like on a podcast. I think the knowledge of what you can do changes again when you're producing it, even if you're self-producing, oh, well, again, no need to wear yourself out playing that over and over and over or singing that over and over when I've got the essence that I can't fake. I've got all of the best human things I need out of it. Now the technology can help me. I think that's just evolved over the years. Even with instruments, in a previous episode, we were talking about working day and night, all those layers of percussion and brass. You could recreate that song pretty close to what it is. Just one person could sit on their computer and dial all that stuff up and program it in and recreate all of that thing. Granted, those of us who notice, and actually I think everybody notices, you can tell the human difference in it, but it could be created a lot less expensively and be about 95% of the way there, just as the technology evolved.
Yeah, and I think that there's, going back to this question about what the take limit is, I think it really has changed a ton, because when you're just recording on your own computer, when you're recording your own part, you can afford to take as many takes as you want. it really doesn't matter as much because it's just time, right? So I think that leads to a different sort of challenge, because when you're pressed on studio time because of money, you end up making whatever you can with whatever you have.
Hmm.
And as opposed to when you're trying to get everything just right, there's a certain point in time that you hit diminishing returns and you have to figure that out. So I think that there is a bit of wisdom in there, because you can shoot for, because you can afford to get that level of perfection. It changes the calculus a little bit.
Yeah. There's some phrase that's like, genius comes with a brilliant idea and not quite enough time. Something like that. Or
Yeah.
you get the idea. Sometimes, like, if you have all the time in the world, it's just you in your room doing it. There's no outside force making you do something. So it's nice to have the freedom and be creative. But I think a lot of times art, it helps to have that outside demand. There's a producer, or there's a money commitment, or there's a time commitment. Like, okay, yeah, can you have that song to me in 1 week? Like, those deadlines help. Sometimes even the person that's asking for it, they really don't need it for 2 weeks. But if they put the 1 week in there, it gets you on it, and it just creates, okay, there's a drive. We've got to get this done. I feel like a lot of times the stuff gets done better if you have that little bit of force that you need to be pushing up against.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the couple of different motivations that we've talked about. One of them is procrastination and overcoming procrastination. I think the other one is perfectionism, right? How do we overcome perfectionism in our music making? And you were talking about this in a previous episode where we were talking about the difference between live music and recording, especially when it comes to, in live music, you make a mistake. And if you obsess about the mistake, then you end up making the next mistake, right?
Right.
And so a big part of live music is just letting it go and saying, okay, I just have to be in this moment right here, right now. Whereas for recorded music, we have a different perspective on it. We have the opportunity to fall into or slip into perfectionism.
Yeah.
I know that you were talking about some of the recent recording experiences that you've had. Can you talk a little bit about where that limit was for your producers and what was sufficient and where you needed to re-record?
I think the general vibe I've experienced the most, again, like you said, there's the endless perfectionism, really trying to tweak something perfectly. But I think a place where a lot of producers fall is trying to be as close to just the live thing as possible. The very organic, very human, real emotion, real dynamics, as much of the live as possible, with the added benefit of being able to then fix it if you need to. Right. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Whereas like in a live performance, yep, that went by. Some note was just weird. And the more I think about it, there's probably gonna be some more weird notes. But if I just keep going, it's fine. No one even notices sometimes the thing that I notice. And then because again, in recorded art, people can actually also consume it over and over and over, and they can go back and listen to it. So you, on equal playing field, can go back and correct something. So rather than making everything perfect, it's still like, yeah, the most egregious offenders, I guess, in terms of notes or a lyric or a pitch or a rhythm of something, being able to do the things that really just bring the music down and making it better musically. And then that's where everybody's line will be different, is just how much should be corrected.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is I think everybody has some point of like, even if you're going for a very live thing, okay, let's fix these few things. It's really great, but that sour note there really ruins the line. If I just fix that one note, oh, that's great. Oh, the drummer on that played that thing just a little bit late. If I just move that over a little, now it feels better and it doesn't ruin that whole great performance. I feel like that's what most producers generally are kind of going for. There are exceptions where it's like, no, I want this as clean as possible, almost unperformable live, because I just want to create this sonic place that's different from live. And so it depends on what you're after, but I feel like that's the most frequent thing I encounter, is trying to capture it like it's totally natural, and then with the ability to kind of just fix little things when needed, just because you can.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about the overcorrection, because I know that you've pointed out some albums to me where it's been overproduced and it sounds a lot faker than the actual thing. Can you talk a little bit about where that limit is?
Again, that's just different for everybody and depends on the kind of music. More pop and electronic music, the ear accepts a little bit more of the super tuned voices, because that just goes with the electronic sounds that are with the voices. So it kind of fits the vibe of the sonic thing that you're building. If you have a beautiful, lush ballad, bossa nova, where you want a big, rich, thick vocal sound, that super tuned sound isn't as at home there. So if you're trying to fix those notes, you have to try to do it in a different way than you do on up-tempo electronic-y type of a song. So I feel like that's evolved quite a bit, and people have heard that. Producers and engineers, editors have started to hear those things like, wow, okay, those notes are all quote unquote right, but does it work artistically still with it so tuned? And the ability now for people to be able to fix some of those things, get things in tune, and have it still sound more natural as if it was sung is really helping. Again, the technology there is really improving.
Well, it sounds like definitely is a matter of taste, and also that the music producer is really important, even if it's yourself, right? Like the decisions that you make in that are important in figuring out, depending on what genre you're in, where it sits in that natural versus overly produced spectrum that you have.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts here before we wrap up?
That's it. This was a good one.
Awesome. Okay, so with that, we will see you next week.
See you soon.
Of course you do, because you're Trist and you know everyone.
Oh, I sound like I know words. That's so great.
Actually, I've been told we don't punch anymore.
No, you're thinking of, I can't think of it either. The winner of phraseology is...
Thank you. That's it. You got it.